Hey, hey, we're
Hey, hey,
back.
this gonna be a good one.
You got the feeling?
Yeah, yeah, I feel it. I feel it in my bones. He describes himself as a Mainer. Have you heard that term before?
A Mainer, no.
Yeah, yeah. So he's from Maine. Very proud
A
of
New
it.
Yorker, like, I mean, yeah, but a Mainer, that's a
Yeah,
stretch. I'm
yeah,
going on, I'm going with that's a stretch.
that's right. That's right. I love the conversation with Frank the other day. It was
Yeah.
brilliant.
And then he's like going at it again. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
listen, wasn't enough. I'm
that's
going
right.
back
It was
into,
enough. Yeah, that's
I
right.
promise you, we're going to be seeing him in elderly care, type 2 diabetes, chronic
Yeah, yeah. Well, the
condition.
forever model is interesting, right?
I don't think he's ever given up.
No, no, and he's so understated. Like, we had to pull the information. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
I love
I
that.
know.
Here's Owen now.
Mainer.
Mainer.
Let's see.
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, the
Yeah.
Mainer. That's what we're going to call
Yeah,
you.
Mainer.
yeah,
Oh, look, he's got
I
the
love it. Hi, Sarah. Hey, Martin.
hey,
Hey,
hey.
what's the jacket? Is that an M for Maine?
Hey,
For
yeah, no,
Mainer.
you got it down. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
So on brand. I'm on brand.
You're on
Yeah.
brand.
Yeah, yeah.
You're you're geographically loyal.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. How are you two doing today?
we're good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good.
yeah. Thanks for joining us on.
Yeah,
Where are you in Maine today?
I am. Yeah, I'm in our office in downtown Portland, Maine, which is where about two-thirds of the company is, and then one-third randomly distributed throughout the U.S. basically.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
I know any international folks?
Um, we did have a couple in Canada at one point, but not anymore.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So we're pretty US focused right
Yeah, I
now.
suppose that's where your business is, right? So
Yeah,
makes
yeah.
sense. That makes sense. So this main is a kind of overarching theme in your story. So what we wanted to do is before we get into MedRhythms, talk a little bit about your backstory, how you got there.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me just hand it over to you on. You can give us a little bit of a kind of synopsis of like your life before MedRhythms. Then we'll dig into MedRhythms and then your company of choice, and let's see where we go from there. Is that okay?
Sounds great.
Okay. So give us the backstory.
Yeah, and then we're live now then. We're live.
We're live. We're recording.
Yeah.
Live.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So backstory. We're gonna go way back. So I grew up in a town called Patten, Maine. It was 100 miles north of Bangor, which was the major city, which is really a small metro area. About 900 people live there. And my father's a third generation logger, actually, so was in the
Oh, okay.
forest there. My mom worked in the kitchen in the school. And actually, the first 10 years of my life with them, we grew up in a trailer on my grandparents' land.
Wow.
And yeah, so like definitely deep woods. But I learned a lot growing up there, which really kind of connects even to how we built the med rhythms and the cultural pillars, right? We learned a lot about hard work, right? The people there. Um, I mean, I watched my father go to work at like 2 a.m. and like come
Wow.
home at like 4 or 5 p.m. and then spend time with the family. And then and then go to do it every day over and over again, and then work on the weekends on the truck. So learned a lot about that. You learned a lot about how to treat people
Yeah.
there because you
Yeah.
get a town of 900 people with a lot of relatives potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a lot
And
of
you're
places to hide.
yeah. You're walking through the grocery store.
Yeah.
Uh, you got to be kind and friendly, or they're gonna remember it. Or I've had it happen before where someone like calls your mom and is like, "Why is your son snotty?" Right? Like, why didn't he say hello? Or whatever. Yeah. So you got to do that.
Yeah. But I'm guessing that only happens once.
It only happens once, right?
Yeah.
And then you're scared. But the other thing is the small town like allows you to have in my case opportunities to try a lot of things.
Yeah.
You could be relatively good at things versus your peers because there's less of them. Uh, to have some successes and failures and to work on teams. And so
Yeah.
that's the roots. And that was
Yeah.
really important to me. One Another important stop in the journey was the University of Maine. Yeah, I'm wearing my logo here. I studied engineering there. And actually to bring this through line through, I remember when I first got there was 10,000 people on campus. So like it's like a 10x change from my environment growing up. And so slightly overwhelming. So I said, you know what, I'm gonna set a goal for the first 3 months. I'm gonna meet someone new every single day while I'm on
Awesome.
campus. So I
Yeah.
did that. I met someone new every single day. And so then everywhere I'd go, I'd know everyone, right? So it's like felt like a small town again.
Yeah.
But you know, studied engineering there, learned a lot about that. That's where sort of, you know, I know we're gonna get to MedRhythms, but the lines intersect there
Yeah.
because Brian, I met him at the University of Maine, my co-founder.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he actually, I was in a fraternity. The fraternity was SIG up. We, you know, just we didn't actually allow alcohol in the house, so not like what you would think from normal fraternities. We were the top
Okay.
GPA. Like we like tried to be achievers. I recruited Brian to join the
Oh,
fraternity.
wow.
I was 1 year older than him. I was his mentor in the
Oh, wow.
fraternity for a number of years, and we
Yeah.
this like, you know, like almost brother-like relationship, like really
Amazing.
early days.
Yeah.
Brian knows more about me and has probably spent more time with me than my wife has in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right.
Yeah. So don't tell Holly that. But
Yeah.
so did that. We left. I left Maine for about 4 or 5 years.
Mhm.
Moved to Boston. Brian 1 year later actually moved down and was my roommate in Boston for a number of years.
Okay. So you
Um,
guys were really close friends before you
Yeah.
started the company.
Before Brian and I started the company, he was and is my best friend.
Oh,
And
wow. Amazing.
we were close friends.
Yeah.
I started out in sales and marketing my career. It kind of connects. Like I just like to talk to people as I've
Yeah.
described, right? So it worked. He started out as a neurologic music therapist at Spalding Rehab in Boston.
Mhm.
Wow.
Was actually Brian is a remarkable human because ever since I knew him at the University of Maine, he always has said, Owen, like I want to use like music and neuroscience to help people. Like there's something there. Like this has been like a North Star of his ever
Yeah.
since I've known Brian. I don't
Yeah.
know any other person, including myself, right? Like that has had that kind of North Star
Yeah.
from that young age, which I think is it's been really important as we get to the MedRhythms journey to
Yeah.
have. So we were there. We were roommates. I was in sales. He was at Spalding. I ended up going to business school. And so while at business school at Harvard, I started actually a 3D printing of electronics company. So
Yeah.
that was the first time that I started on the entrepreneurial journey. You know, we were
Tell us about like where did that come from?
Yeah.
yeah. So it's a good question. So two pieces. One is at the time I just got really into like I do this thing where like I pick something and I get excited about it and I go all in and I learn about it. I meet everyone in the space. And at the time when I first was going to the HBS, 3D printing had just become like it existed for a lot of years, but it was when it was just taken on. It was a real trend, right? And so I said, "Oh, this is interesting. It's the wave of the future. Let me learn." And so I started meeting with people across the industry. I ended up at a Harvard lab, this lab, Jennifer Lewis's lab at Harvard, and she had some really good technology that used materials in a different way, and you could print wires and antennas directly into mechanical objects. So you could design things differently. And so, you know, we thought, wow, you can really make unique shapes, you know, electrical shapes, and you can make cool antennas. You can do a lot of things. There's a big need out there for it, but it's just in a lab right now. And so there was like 5 or 6 of us that showed up there that said wanted to solve it. So that was one. Reflecting back on, so that was one, like there was the need. I was excited about the area. It sounded like a cool experience. There was a lot of energy there.
Yeah.
Connecting to where we started, actually, though, I think watching the entrepreneurial journey, like watching my father who had owned, like when I say he was in the forestry industry, he actually owned his own log truck, right?
Okay.
He was owner
He
operator.
was an entrepreneur.
He set his own schedule.
Yeah.
You know, I said he went to work at 2 and he came home at 6, but if we had a basketball game, he'd be home at 3:30, right? He could figure out how to make it work.
Yeah.
He was always working on the weekends, right? But we were included, right? And
Yeah.
but so this is like
Brilliant.
autonomy over your schedule and
Yeah.
like doing something from nothing and like being the one where like, you know, the buck stops with you was ingrained in me. I just didn't know it until then. And so
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Brilliant.
yeah,
And
so
actually, go ahead, sorry.
yeah, go ahead. What was that, Martin?
So then the jump from like I'm interested in this, I've seen my dad be like build his business and manage and be in control. That was just a natural kind of thing to say, let's go and start a company.
Yeah, well, it was almost a okay, we have this technology, where do we go next? And it's like, well, the only way to bring it to the world is a company. And so then we like said, okay, let's build a company. Well, how do you do that? Like you gotta find a market, and you gotta figure out what the problem you're solving. You gotta figure out if someone wants it, and then
Yeah.
you gotta figure out how to get some money to do it. And so it was on the job training for me. Like at the same time, I was actually taking MBA courses like entrepreneurial
Yeah.
finance, right? And founder's dilemma, and just the entrepreneurial manager, and it was um the best application of my like knowledge was to just try it immediately, basically.
Yeah.
So it was really good learning lab for me. Company had success. I did that, helped launched it, was there through my MBA. It has now exited, right? We had a big launch at Consumer Electronics Show of the 3D printer. We raised some money from some investors, including Incutel, the VC of the CIA. But when I was graduating, there was a lot of us that founded the company, and
Yeah.
and so that's in my mind, that's a challenge. It's hard to figure out who holds the vision and the future, and what to focus on, and it gets fragmented. And there was some really good people there, and I thought I could better apply my like background and skills somewhere else, and like I was like, well, I'm actively gonna go try to figure out what else to do. Uh,
Uh-huh.
and made that
That
call.
was diplomatic.
What's that?
That was diplomatic.
That was yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
What you
yeah,
just
yeah.
said.
Yeah,
I'm gonna apply my skills. The buck wasn't stopping with you, so you went somewhere else.
yeah. No, yeah, perhaps, there's good success and good people there, but yeah, we definitely wanted to try out a different scenario. And I had made it. I remember at that same time, right? I was doing that. I remember sitting in my last session at HBS, right, which I was graduating, and they were talking about 10-year reunion, which my 10-year reunion is this summer, right? So this is coming up, and I think I've successfully like solved for what they were talking about, which was like they said, well, 10 years out from business school, many people are unhappy. Oft like a lot of people get divorced, right?
Right.
Like they regret what they do. They made bad choices. They not feel purpose. Like there's this whole list of things, and I'm sitting there like
Wow.
petrified. Like wait, like this is the world I'm going into. It doesn't make any sense. And so I remember thinking in the ingredients of like what the people that were happy were they were often working on a big mission. They're often working with people they trust. They often had autonomy over their lives, or feel like they had some flexibility and autonomy. And so to me, it was wild because at that point in time, you could literally choose whatever you did with your life, right? Like there's a lot of options. I guess less so right now because they've had a hard time finding jobs this year. But like lots of options, you can literally choose. Why do we choose things that are bad for us in that way, right? And so I was like, whatever I do, however I construct my life, it's got to make sure that like when I'm at my 10-year reunion, I'm not in that bucket, which is I'm not. So I'm a success in June. Um, and and so this is where I was searching on what to do next. And Brian in the background, right? Even like 6 months leading up to this moment, he kept coming to me with these videos of him and Spalding, and being like, "Hey, Owen, look at George. Look how good George is recovering. Like it's kind of a miracle. He had 3 weeks of PT. He couldn't walk like this before. Um,
Hmm.
when he leaves, George can't get this care. That seems like a problem. Like, how do we solve that problem?" And Brian is, as I said, this has been his North Star. He's like really persistent. And so he was like knocking down my door with these videos all the time. And so I started advising on this question. And so while I had that session at HBS and was advising on this and was trying to look for what else to do, I found I was spending all my time just advising on Brian on this question. And um, eventually I was like, Brian, like, why don't we just start a company and figure out the answer to like how to take what you were doing in the hospital, which he was using, how rhythm can like stimulate the brain, connect the auditory and motor system, e.g. play a rhythm, you sync to it. It goes around damaged centers of the brain. He was doing that manually, watching someone walk, adapting what was happening on the rhythm in the guitar. They would speed up subconsciously because of how it works in the brain. And
Yeah.
they'd train there and get results. Like, how do you take that and reach people if they're in Patten, Maine or, you know, other places?
Right.
And so we launched the company at that point in time, and it's been a wild ride ever since.
And when was that?
Also, one other piece, sorry to cut you off, Sarah. I remember the conversation, which was like, we were going to start it, we figured it out, etc. I remember going with my wife and going to have dinner with her, right, that night, and said, "Hey, Holly, like, I think I'm going to start this company with Brian." And she's like, "Wait, okay, so you're not going to like make any money, or like you're not like,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
Let me just get this straight. Yeah.
what about this job?" And like, and she's an optometrist and she had just graduated, so she was like looking for herself. And she went into full on negotiation, which, by the way, like I was on board with this, but like it was so funny to watch. She's like, "Okay, well, if you're not going to make any money, we're going to move to Maine. We're going to live 3 miles from where I work, and you can do whatever you want." I mean, I didn't push back because that was in the plans, but I thought it was so fun. It was just instant negotiation mode. So we did. We moved here when we started the company, and it was a great decision.
And when was that? How long ago was that?
So that was started in 2015. So it's been a while. We moved to Maine in 2016. So we had 6 months in Boston, and then you had to wait for Holly to wrap up her residency and these sort of things, and then it moved up here. We've had many pieces to the journey along the way, right? We started actually answering the question of like, how do you take Brian and reach more people by training more Brians and in hiring therapists, and which were, I mean, we've treated a lot of patients, more than just walking. We treat language, we treat cognition, we built a therapy practice, we converted Brian's role at Spalding to a contract for MedRhythms for Brian, and eventually for a contract for MedRhythms with a bunch of therapists. We in-home care. We've signed up other hospitals over time. You know, it was going relatively well. It was a therapy practice, so like things like small business, right?
Okay.
Scalable business.
Yeah.
But I don't know, 12 months, 18 months into that journey, we were like, I remember sitting down with Brian and saying, like, look, like, this is going to reach the 3.5 million people that have chronic stroke walking deficits, so the million people in the US, right? There are the million people with Parkinson's and growing in about 100 years, right? Like at this, like it's, and like, you know, I know it's
Harvard.
Yeah, the math. Like, right, I did the math. It's like 100 years, right? So I'm not going to live that long. This is your North Star, right?
Yeah.
Like, we should either
have to accelerate,
figure out a different way to do this, or like you can go run the practice and I'm going to go figure something out, right? Like, so we had this conversation.
Yeah.
He's like, no, like, go ahead, Martin.
So you didn't go and raise money early? You were kind of bootstrapping it, or did you raise some capital, or how did you go about financing?
Early days, we got paid to
Beautiful.
deliver.
Yeah, beautiful. Getting paid by customers is a great way of financing a business.
Yeah, though Holly was like, it's kind of a hobby because you're not getting paid, really.
Right. Remind me never to negotiate with your wife. It sounds like.
Yeah. I'm like, well, I could eat because you make money, so this is fine, right? So,
yeah. It's funny working with. I started Health Excel with my wife, and about a year in, we decided that we never wanted to work together again. We're still happily married, but we're never doing that again. And it's very tricky to work with family or friends. There's a lot of trust there, but there's also a lot of history and complexity. How do you guys manage that? Because I'm sure it wasn't all plain sailing for 10 years. I'm sure there were times when it wasn't so clear. So how do you guys manage that? How do you organize yourselves as well?
It's interesting because everyone has a philosophy on this. So like, I only work with friends I trust. I never work with people I'm friends with. I never work with family. I only, and it's
very black and white.
It's way more nuanced than that in my mind. Like I have many friends I would never work with.
Right.
But you got to make sure that like, and Brian and I talked about this up front, right? We got to share similar values. We got to trust each other. We got to commit to excellence. We got to be intellectually honest enough that neither of us holds the right answer, right? Like I'm not right, you're not right. Like we just need to debate it out and figure it out and go from there. We need to I remember this was Founders Dilemmas class that I took, which was just had been the semester before. They had this thing called the playing with fire gap, which is actually the closer the relationship you have, the less likely you are to talk about the hard things sometimes.
Right.
And so, and that if that grows, right, they call that the playing with fire gap because that's going to grow into a major rift. And so
Yeah.
we had an explicit conversation and said, like, this is one of the reasons why friends don't work out or family
Huh.
don't work out. So like
Right.
if you feel uncomfortable about saying something, just say it because it's going to get worse
Yeah.
weeks, months, etc. down the road. And that has served us really well. Yeah, we've been through tough times, like existential times for the company, like
Mhm.
disagreements on strategy. We've been through all those, but I don't think our relationship has been through a tough time, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Well, that's
At
fair.
least not in your opinion, right?
Yeah, talk to Brian. Yeah.
We haven't asked Brian
Yeah,
yet.
Brian was saying
Your
something different last
opinion,
night.
it's been going great.
Yeah. Talk to Brian or talk to Stacy, Brian's wife, and see what he says about me. So, yeah. I don't think so. I mean, an aside, my mom now watches Brian's kids, so like it's even more intersecting. So,
Okay.
Oh wow, yeah.
yeah. So,
But were there times like when in those deep time, like in those rough times, were there times in those honest conversations where the two of you said, like, what are we doing? Like, are we going to keep doing this? Can we keep doing this? Should we keep doing this? Are we just doing this because we like actually working with each other and we're still committed to the mission, but it's just a tough grind. I mean, how do you guys get through, or have you just is it always been Brian's North Star and then became your North Star and there's just been no question you were going to plow on?
oh, I mean, there's been multiple moments where we've had conversations like that along the way, right? So, I mean, Brian though, always been his North Star, can be his North Star for another 50 years, I'm certain. Maybe not 100, but another 50, right? But we've had those conversations. One of those was when we said when we were talking about, well, is this therapy practice going to scale, right? In reaching up people, and what are we doing? That happened, right? And the decision was actually we're going to build a product that takes Brian's brain and turns it into an algorithm and puts it in a box and like ships it out to people, right? So that's the way to scale. Another moment I remember, and I'm skipping ahead a bit in the story. So, that conversation, the therapy conversation was sort of end of 16. Where I'm going right now is like 18 months later in middle of 2018, we're about to raise our Series A round of financing. And we had talked to everyone, like I had my list and there was no one left on the list. Right. So yeah. And so we're like, okay, well, we're gonna run out of money.
Let's go back to the start.
Yeah. No one left on the list. We had one guy on the list. We had a bunch of we were raising 4 million. We had a bunch of money on the sidelines, sort of saying, like, give the normal term sheet. I'm in. I'm here. Like, let me know. Not the nose, but like I could do 200 to 4 million. Whatever they make up, right? Like I got this whole right. And so I remember driving down with Brian to Connecticut to see this guy. And we were talking about, I said, well, if this doesn't work, like we're going to have to recalibrate and maybe do something else, or maybe like I'll do some consulting. And, we were having that serious conversation. But we're like, okay, let's give it a shot. This guy we met with, he's got a fund, but it's a sole LP. His money. He's the largest donor in UConn history, right? So he's a big donor. He loves UConn basketball. So I had read every stat about every UConn basketball game in the last like 20 years, right? So we could talk about Ray Allen, Rip Hamilton, like we were ready. Like I knew he was in the Hall of Fame. So we spent like 20 minutes like dissecting the national championship games for UConn basketball.
Don't forget the women. They were kick-ass, remember?
Yeah. We talked about Rebecca Lowe, but I mean, we covered the women too. Yeah.
Okay. Just making sure.
This guy is like, he does some work with Gino, actually. Like, so there's definitely a Gino conversation. Yeah, for sure. So we covered all that. UConn women were dominant for so long. So we covered all that. We talked about the company for like 40 minutes. And it went great. Like it went great. The concept was great. This was going well, etc.
Can I pause you for a second? Because I think a lot of the listeners won't know what it is. I know the first time I met you guys, like Brian called me on stage and asked me to demonstrate how to walk, you know, and I remember being on this stage going, okay,
Yeah.
what's going on here, you know? So maybe
Yeah.
just pause for a second and then we continue with that because it's a great story. I just want to make sure people know what we're talking about.
No, it's good. And this is what I'll tell you what we told him, right? So we
Yeah.
said like, we want to help people walk better again. And it's based on this science of how you can use rhythm and music to like basically connect the auditory and motor system in a new way that rewires the brain so you get neuroplasticity. It looks like if you're walking to a beat, we'll start a beat in a song. So it's a song. In that, you can speed someone up. If they have a stroke, you often want to speed them up. So because if you walk faster, you walk more in balance. You speed them up by slowly increasing the cadence. So they sync to it, they speed up. They don't know they're doing it actually. Like it just sort of happens subconsciously.
Yeah.
You can add cues and accents to one of the sides while they're walking to get them to take longer strides sometimes. So like, how about with asymmetry? So for a user, we have a product now that does this, and you put on sensors that on the feet that measure the walking in real time. You have a handheld device that brings it in. We start them at that rhythm. They had a set of headphones on. They do it anywhere they want in their home, out in the community. They walk. We start them at the rhythm, and then we have this clinical thinking algorithm that basically tries to push them as fast as possible while they're still safe. So we're measuring symmetry and variability in real time.
Yeah.
We bring in music. Actually, we have a deal with the Universal Music Group, so we get 50% of the world's music to be able to be almost like a healthcare DJ, where we modify it
Great.
every time to do that, and add things to it. And at the end, they walk for 30 minutes. The user thinks they're walking to music. They get lasting results on the other side. We have taken it through clinical trials with successful primary endpoint. We've hit through the FDA. We got a Medicare code, the code with a good price, and now we're getting coverage and adoption on this as an in-home use durable medical equipment to do that. So that's the it. So we were telling Peter at the time, the investor, this is the plan. This is what we're going to go do. We're going to take Brian's brain, we're going to put it into a box, and we're going to reach people this way, right? So we were doing that 40 minutes, and then I remember him like, okay, so what do you want from me? And so Brian was ready. He's like, okay, so raising $4 million. We want you to lead the round, put in $2 million. We got 1.5, we got 500,000 committed and 1.5 soft committed. Round will get together and we'll go help a lot of stroke patients. And so I remember in that moment, like Peter, like leaning back just like this. And he sits there for like 45 seconds. And he looks at us, he's like, okay, so we talked about valuation and stuff too, but I'm going to skip that part. But he's like, you raising 4. Yep. How much do you have for sure? We're like 500,000. We're like, what's the 1.5? Like, well, they said they would come in with a term sheet. He's like, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to put in 3.5, get rid of all the other money, take the 500,000, and you guys can get back to work. What do you think? And this is the first time we met this guy. And we're like,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, that could work, right? That could work. Yeah, like the math checks, right? That's what we need. And so it's funny because he had his guy with him, like that helps him out. This really like smart investment guy, and his investment guy is like, okay, but we're gonna have to do some diligence and like look at the paperwork, and then Peter looks at us, and he's like, are you two criminals? And we're like, no, we're not criminals. And he looks at Vin, and he looks at his guy, and he's like, do we not have the money? Like, do we not have the money? And he's like, no, we got the money. He's like, well, just send them the money. Your diligence isn't going to find anything, Vinny. Like this is good. Like I like it. So that was the moment we almost gave up, and then it took off from there.
Amazing story. And at that point, like, did he ask you about like how he's going to get his money back or what your business model? Because I'm sure you were still figuring out a lot of that stuff.
I mean, this person is actually had a lot of success investing, and he knows medical devices and pharmaceuticals really well. And I think he was betting on the unmet need and the outcome and the fact that I think you can tell Brian's North Star is there and he's not going to give up, right? Like at that stage, he's not going to give up and he's going to fight through it. So, he's made a lot of money getting it back. And I think in the earliest of early days, it's almost like if you check the big market unmet need and founders aren't going to give up boxes.
Yeah.
It's you get too analytical beyond that, and who knows what happens, right?
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
So that changed. So then there was a big party on the way on the drive back. Or
Yeah, we were in a much better spirits than the drive back. Though it's now like now we need to go prove it, right? Now we need to go run the trials and show. And so we haven't been very good celebrators over time. We're just sort of like, okay, this is good, and let's just get back to work and keep going, right? Like I always we have to remind ourselves the team probably wants to do a celebration for these things, but yeah. So we
or
did that.
Holly might have been like, finally.
Yeah, Holly was happy. Everyone was happy. People were surprised. They're like, "Oh, this is a thing now, right?" Like,
Oh, you guys are just hanging out. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it looked fun, right? It looked like a nice hobby that you had over there. So we did that. Then, I mean, fast forward, feasibility study went great. Ran a pivotal study, worked with the FDA on the design of that for chronic stroke for people with walking deficits, 6 months out from stroke was the study. Ended up being an 8-site randomized control trial. We launched that trial. So we did a feasibility study, refined the product for like a year. We launched that trial end of 2019, early 2020, right? So it gets underway, recruit a third of the cohort, the world shuts down, right?
But you were an at-home solution, right?
We were, but our trial design was such that we had them come to the clinic, autonomously use the product, but there's no clinician intervention, and we were going to do a usability study for the at-home component, so we can control for environment.
Right. Okay.
So trials shut down for an unknown amount of time. We rallied the troops. Luckily, from a work style perspective, we have a philosophy at MedRhythms, which is like we hire adults. You can work wherever you want. Like I don't track what you do. So like the move to remote, other than the trauma of the world, right? The move to remote was not a challenge for us, but a lot of unknown in there. We instantly jumped on making changes. Like Brian and I cut our salaries. Like we did a bunch of things. We went out to the investors and say like, hey, now's a good time to put some more money in. Like, I don't know when it might not be a good time. It'd be good for the company if you put some more.
Right. I was wondering how you're going to spin that on.
Yeah, but so I went and we hey, we cut our salaries by half or a third to a third. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. The outcomes here, the work, if you bring this in, it'll give us enough to weather the storm and get the trial back up and running. And luckily they've been super supportive. So boom, did that. I forget when it was, maybe 7 months. So 8 months. I think we started back up in November, December of that year, the trial, but people were only running one patient at a time, and it's a 5-week intervention. So recruitment was so slow. And so the period of time where we were just waiting, we were doing things, we were working on business development, we are working on conversations, but, got it through, finally got it done, hit our endpoint, which was amazing. We improved walking speed by more than MCID, minimally clinically important difference. We statistically significant, we're better than the control group. There's no solutions for people with chronic stroke for walking deficits right now. At that point in time, now we're a solution. And so we got breakthrough status from the FDA. So there was a lot of good stuff that happened in there in the midst of a lot of uncertainty. So that happened. Yeah, go ahead.
I was saying, did you get that breakthrough status when it was still linked to sort of an expedited reimbursement benefit, or in the period where they had kind of retracted it already?
Yeah. So we got the breakthrough status. Let me do the math. We got it. Sort of the middle, was it 21? here's how, I don't remember the exact years, but we got the breakthrough status. There was the MSIT, like exists, which was like coverage for 4 years for Medicare. It was gonna go into place. Like it was like wow, like we're a
Yeah.
billion-dollar company, right? This is the bigger, right? Like 50% of our market is stroke. Things are gonna go great. This is the holy grail for medical device companies. So that was awesome. We were excited. Data was good. We're gonna get through the FDA. MSIT rule came out, was like draft. We're like, draft looks good. We wrote comments, draft looks good. Keep it going. MSIT rule. Then came the final. It was like 60 days later or 40 days later, it was gonna go final, which just so happened to be like when Biden was inauguration happened. It was
Yeah.
gonna go final the next day. The next day. Like it was gonna be final the next day. It got paused immediately.
Yeah.
It got changed and ripped up. So we were one day away from having like the holy grail for medical device companies, ready to rock, going to help us reach a lot of people a lot faster. So yeah,
Right.
that was, yeah,
That was brutal. Yeah.
that was brutal. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely a roller coaster on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So a couple of things. I'm sure Sarah has a bunch of questions as well. We're interested in great companies. So companies that, solve a major customer problem, companies that, return to their shareholders, companies that look after their employees, companies that have a big impact in the world. They're the kind of the ways we think about it all. So a couple of things. I was going to ask you a little bit about culture. So it's quite obvious what you're doing is having a major impact um, for your patients. And
Yeah.
talk a little bit about culture and hiring adults. And yeah, let's get into that.
Yeah. So we care a lot about this at MedRhythms. I remember when we were 9 people and we were going to start scaling people up to more. And we were really worried about what that would mean for culture. Because before that, culture can be like how you interact every day, right? And Brian and I are pretty consistent, right? And so you can have interactions with people, you can be in the room and it like set the tone, but we were not explicit about it. And so we were worried about that. So we actually did this exercise, which I was a skeptic of at first. My engineer in me was like, this is never going to work. But I was like, okay, it makes sense. We did this exercise where we had the whole team get together for a couple of hours and they told stories about what it's been like to work at MedRhythms, right? They like the good, the bad, everything. Like they had stories, narratives, like what was most important to them. Our thought process was we could take that and distill their experiences into our cultural pillars, and try to take that and put it into that. And we ended up doing that. We had 3 cultural pillars that came out of that. We actually thought the first one was going to be like a patient focused one, given that where we started, though that's more mission almost, like that's more mission, like, but we heard when people were talking about what it's like to work here was their most meaningful moments weren't, I mean, they liked the work of the patients, the vision was like times when their teammates had listened to them, times when their teammates had helped them out, had gone above and beyond, times when even when they disagreed, they weren't a jerk, right? And so we our first pillar is people first, right? So like you can, there's a lot of people that do great things like at mission that aren't great to work with. I mean, this comes back to my experience at the HBS club. Like I'm like, hey, look, like we don't need to all be friends, but we need to have a certain amount of like respect and trust, like and for each other. So that was 1. 2 was we always used to say, and we still do, right? Like we're sort of doing a new thing, new intervention in a place where there's no solutions. And at the time, like it was a new industry. Now I feel like we're durable medical equipment. We're trying, like at the time, digital therapeutics, but like we're like now durable medical equipment. And so we're like, no one else is going to set the standard but us. So we need to be excellence always, right? Like we need to be good. We need to have a high bar. That's pillar number 2. Pillar number 3 was we were a small team. And also this is sort of how I operate, right? Like it's, which is, you know, we don't have, like someone said this in the thing, like at MedRhythms, you don't have time to be a philosopher. Like you need to like do, right? So our third pillar is action focus, right? Like, you know, what are we doing next? And particularly many decisions, the risk is higher to not do anything or to think about it longer than it is to do something and do something wrong, right? Obviously, when it comes to things like Medicare reimbursement for my company's future, for all future products, let's be a little more slow and methodical about those decisions, right?
That's a one-way door. Yeah.
One-way door, right?
Yeah.
But these two-way doors, like the only benefit you have as a small company is you can try something, learn, and change as fast as possible. And so like those are the three things that like we screen for, we talk. The cool thing is people actually talk about the cultural pillars when they're making decisions. Like, and I'm not even have to bring it up, right? Like talk about it when they're making decisions. Like, is that very people first, or like, what's the action focused thing to do right now? Yeah. And that's when I'm like, this. It's like it's one of the things I'm the most proud of, actually.
That's when you know it's real. That's when you know it's not just a poster. It's when people are actually using it to making their day-to-day decisions, right? When you're not, when
I don't
you
even think we have a poster, actually. So you know, maybe we need a poster too. Maybe you need both.
Sounds like it's working. I wasn't over engineering. It sounds like it's working.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sarah, do you want to come in there?
No, I was just saying, like, I mean, that's pretty incredible. There's not many small companies that can pull it off where people are actually talking about culture that, I don't know, pointedly, let's say, right? When really thinking about how they make decisions. Usually big companies have to like ingrain that in the employees and say like, you know, and then they start all talking the same lingo. But in smaller companies, it's tough to really make sure that culture is first when there is that bias for action, even though that seems to be part of the culture. But you know, half the time everybody's just running around and trying to get stuff done, and you know, it seems like you've naturally been able to figure out how to set culture without having to make it too artificial.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I think that the reason why the exercise we did that worked the best in my mind that I didn't think about was not because of the word, like different words mean different things to different people, right? Like you see a word and you might have some baggage associated with that. You might, but it's the stories that people told and the fact that we can retell the stories and you can talk, like gives it enough like character and like texture to it such that people will remember it and get their arms around it and know both like the word by definition and then the application of it.
Yeah.
That's a great way.
I think as founders too, I mean, you spent a lot of time talking about Brian and having this like never give up kind of North Star, but you sort of skipped quickly about, oh, I studied engineering and then my first gig was sales. It's like, what?
Yeah.
I mean, I think honestly,
Fast forward.
I was like, well, I studied engineering and then of course I went into sales. Like,
Yeah.
it's you're a little bit of a behavioralist, you know, like a people, like an anthropologist, you know, in the sense that you have such this affinity, which has come through in this conversation for people that even though you have maybe a mathematical and technical brain to some degree, if you're really interested in the engineering side and spent time in the 3D lab, there's an element of you that actually has, you know, also as a leader, I think helped create the culture of this company around Brian's North Star, which I think probably, as you said, your investor, Peter, right? He must have just seen that. Like, okay, this is a good, it's not like these guys are not just buddies, but like there's a good combination here. Which is also, it's really come through, at least, you know, in this conversation for us as well.
Yeah. I mean, and if you watch Brian and I in action, like we debate all the time. Like it's not like, you know, like we're always in like in a friendly way, but like we're always going at just because like that's how our relationship. So I think that's related to what you just said. Brian's North Star. If you see us debating and not like in being intellectually honest enough to know that like one of us might be wrong, right? That is infectious across. It has to be across the team. If anyone comes in and tries to be like a dictator and is like, "Thou shalt do these things because I thought about them last night," like they're gonna, right?
That's fair that one. So it's obvious that, you know, everything we talked about for the last 45 minutes, like your focus on people and relationship and building culture, like that just seems to go through the whole conversation here. You know, the mission of the company has come out really strongly in terms of looking after both customers, but also patients and a broader mission. Talk a little bit about, as much as you can, on the financial aspect of it and how you think about shareholders, how you picked your next set of investors, and how you think about kind of engaging with them and rewarding them.
Yeah. So if you think about the markets we're in, right? People with chronic stroke walking deficits in the US, there's 3.5 million of them that have it out there. It's a big market and there's no solutions for them. So like, you know, our product currently gets about 1,100 a month for the first few months and 860 to follow, right? So if you do the math, you multiply a number of months by that number, it's a big market, right? So big opportunity. Plus we have a platform, so Parkinson's disease, et cetera. So big market there. So when I think about medical device, right? Like, so obviously you need to start with big market, but you need 4 things. And I've refined this over time. Like I didn't say this when I started, but now I know you need 4 things to create value for investors, right? Like you need good clinical data. So check that box. You need to get through the FDA. And for medical devices, the FDA doesn't get you a whole lot except for a license to get out there. Like the claim is important, but it's not like in drugs where you almost get coverage tied to that. Like it just so, but you need FDA. It's like a stop along the way. Check.
Yeah.
You need reimbursement, which I'm carving reimbursement up into like 2 parts, which is like pricing and coding and coverage over here. So you need pricing and coding, which I'm calling reimbursement, in place. So we got the Medicare code, which was a big feat, and we got the code we wanted with the description we wanted with the pricing we wanted, which is what we wanted but not what we expected, right? Because there's a lot of things that could go wrong in that process. So like
Was that a category 3? Because there was no predicate, right? I mean,
no, so DME, so there's the CPT and the HCPCS-2 codes. CPT is for clinician services, right? So we're not in that bucket because it's at home. So that's where the category lives. HCPCS-2, there's all the A through E's through J's or whatever. We're in the E codes. We got our own E code, E3200, which is for gait training using rhythmic auditory stimulation. For all of our future products actually also apply here. And it's a cap rental model, so it's a rental per month for up to 13 months under that code. So we got our own E code, which then
sorry about that, but that is also a feat. I mean, I want to make sure that, I mean, anyone listening, like you got a broad, so you said you have a platform technology.
Yeah.
That the ability to get that reimbursement breadth is tied to the fact that you have a broader regulatory indication. So you must, I mean, how did that go in the FDA discussions?
So
get a broad indication to start with to then base it off of?
No, our regulatory indication is improved walking and ambulation for chronic stroke survivors.
So it was stroke. Okay. So it was very specific.
Very specific.
Okay.
But the EMS, we made the case that we had a whole bunch of products teed up behind us, and that it's not how they decide, but the subliminal message on that is like, do you really want us to come back every year for a new like
we could just do it now.
Let's just do it now, right? Like write the description such that it could fit all these things, and that's just pricing and coding, right? Like that's the third thing. Like, so we got that check. The fourth thing is what we're calling coverage and adoption. So, we still need to get coverage and adoption, which is where we're at on this journey. But Martin, to investors, right? We crack this even at a small level, which we are. That's where a lot of interesting activity happens for value creation. Because now you can see the unit economics, you can see how to scale it up, you can see like you get $1 in, it gets this many dollars out, right? It's gone from what I call founder risk, which is all these unknown unknowns that only crazy people will do, to like operating and execution risk, which is like you can find someone, it's hard, but you can find someone who's done it.
It's a known path.
Yeah.
You've been very, very clever, Owen, in that we've only got 10 minutes left. I know service up. We could keep going on this. We'd never get to your role model company. So you've been very clever in that, and you've also been very clever in picking one that I'd say a lot of people don't know. So it's hard for us to actually, find things to go against you, but we'll give it a little bit of a shot. So why don't you introduce your role model company and tell us why you picked them?
Well, so in the main theme, I'm keeping the main theme. So I picked this company called IDEX with 2 X's. There's another IDEX with 1 X. And they they're kind of our major success story in the
Mhm.
state. Like they were founded here by this guy David Shaw, who saw an opportunity basically to better do diagnostics for our pets, which everyone loves their dogs, right? So take care of
Right.
it, and do it at the veterinary office versus do it like as sending it away for labs and waiting like 3 days,
Yes.
etc. And he saw this opportunity and captured it, and started in like 1990, like took about 10 years to get to the point where it really started to get to scale.
Yeah.
And then since then, they have become the dominant leader in this industry of vet diagnostics. I think they have like 50% market share, and they've held it. They have really high gross margins for that. They continue to have year-over-year growth for the company. And what I like about them both is like it was like found a niche, built it like outside of Silicon Valley, did it in
Yeah.
a way that like can help animals, and um like I know a lot of people that have worked there and continue to work there. Like they take culture really like it's important to them. They treat their people well. They're always on the forefront of, I mean, all the new things, but like around paid leave and work-life balance and these sort of things. People tend to stay there a long time that have worked there. Um, being in the community, they volunteer and they invest and they commit to their community a lot. And so this is why I like IDEX. I mean, it's definitely off the radar for many people. Unless you're a veterinarian, maybe you probably don't know anything about them. But I've appreciated what they've done. We need more of them here, actually. So but IDEX is a good one.
Yeah, for sure. And it was one I hadn't heard of. And the more I read the investor presentations, and it was just this kind of really interesting story of great innovation in an interesting space. And then, as you say, high margins, and all the focus around how they treat their employees seemed pretty genuine from what I could
The
read.
other thing that's interesting too, and this is more back to Maine, right? Like, which is it's created a cluster, right? Like, it's really cool to see from an economic development perspective to see like a major success seemingly out of nowhere where we didn't have any like background,
Yeah.
and multiple other companies have started like around it. Covetrus is now here, which is used to be Henry Schein Animal Health, and they acquired them and they brought them here. And so that's a big major company that's based here. There's been two startups that have had multiple $100 million exits. There's a company called Rare Breed, which was a vet clinic roll up, which has raised like over $1 billion in capital and it's 3,000 employees, and they've only been around for 3 years. And so you think about not just like their employee impact, their shareholder impact, their stickiness as a company, and they keep hitting their numbers. But like how it's a model to think about like how you do economic development in a place that's been sleepy-ish over the last 25 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's pretty
Could you
incredible.
dig anything up on it, Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, I actually had heard of it before. As
Yeah.
an American, my background, I had heard of it before. And I also noted that, prior to you, Owen, it was like, sorry, it was most of the guests, including ourselves, we all picked companies from kind of where we're from.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
cool.
so we were like, oh yeah, good like also good old state of Maine.
Yeah. Home field advantage.
Yeah. But I
Yeah.
think there's something to that too, that you were like the things you're describing, you've seen them active in the community, you've seen the people that have worked there, and you've actually got like firsthand experience talking to employees of that company. So you actually feel like you can vouch for a company like that and say, yeah, no, this is what I think a great company looks like. So I think proximity to making that call actually does make a difference for all of us.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
The only
It's
thing,
yeah. Go ahead, Martin. Go
the
ahead.
only thing I could find was that maybe in some cases that it's a pretty high pressure environment, and so I thought that was interesting that you got this very heavy focus on culture and looking after people, but also maybe a pretty intense environment, and that culture doesn't suit some people. I don't know how you think about that, both in MedRhythms or in other companies, of like how much is too much, how much pressure is too much, and how do you match your culture to that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's really industry specific in my mind. Like, and because there's like a practicality to, you need to like be able to like exist to then like give people jobs to like win
Yeah.
and
Right.
right,
Right.
right,
Yeah.
right. And particularly, I'm thinking I'm actually putting on my my higher ed hat because I'm on the board of trustees for the University of Maine system, right? And the higher ed in the US is an environment where if you're traditional college age for the next 13 years, you have less high school students in the US graduating as seniors. And so your market is declining. So it's declining market. So in
Yeah.
declining market, it's really important that you win new students because you have this fixed cost base. And so
Yeah.
I think in those environments, sometimes you get some of the rosiness things of culture, which we have great institutions, trying to be diplomatic, but like are hard, like hard to maintain because if you don't go out and are as aggressive as possible to try to get people in to try to like educate that, then you have a you have a hard time, right?
Yeah.
Like thriving because you may or may it's existential, right? There's
Yeah.
as of earlier this year, there's a college and university, and I don't think it's true anymore, a week closing in the US because of this situation. So
Okay.
yeah, not this year, earlier last year.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that's a really good point. It's so dependent on what the market is and where you're in the market and a lot of history.
So Harvard just got much easier to get into, is what I'm hearing, right?
I don't know. No, I think the brands, yeah, the brands are still going to be harder to get it, harder and harder. Actually, yeah. Um,
It's been the hours kind of flash by in no time, Owen, and we could keep going. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but you've been very insightful in your comments and also very modest in terms of what you and Brian have built. I think it's one of a very small number of companies that succeeded in this space and has been a real category definer in terms of what you're doing in an area that like 10 years ago wasn't obvious to a lot of people. And it's really exciting and interesting to hear about how you think about the company and how you're looking after your employees and all the stakeholders. So just want to say
Cool.
thank you and
Appreciate the time. Yeah, it's good to talk to you both.
Yeah, same here. It was lovely, Owen. Thanks so much.
okay, take care.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.